Red flags advising beaches had been closed were on the sand within hours of the Solomons earthquake, but some autumn beachgoers opted to take their chances despite lifeguards informing them of the unfolding situation.
We are advising the beach is closed for swimming today. Council and the Department of Meteorology have issued warnings due to a tsunami warning that's up and down the east coast of Australia today.
It may have been a case that some surfers were waiting for a tsunami-induced improvement in conditions.
The horizon at the moment looks very flat and normal, and no indication whatsoever.
While board riders and paddlers at the northern end of Nobbies appeared to be after a big wave experience. Others, however, were being cautious, with some vessels at anchor off Newcastle opting to head for deeper water. The bulk of spectators decided the higher ground of Fort Drive below Fort Scratchley would be the best vantage point, although others thought the Nobbies car park would have a better view.
Maybe we'll have a slightly bigger wave come through. I don't know whether it's just going to be one or a number of waves, but or maybe nothing.
Even though it appeared to be a case of nothing much to see by early afternoon, the Weather Bureau continued to caution people to remain on high ground and the boats in shallow water returned to shore. Gary Blair, NBN News.
It seems more and more people are choosing to forego the love of a canine companion in favour of a smaller, neater and quieter animal, according to the Australian Veterinarian Association.
People still have the urge to interact with animals and have them in their life, but maybe they're looking towards ferrets or rats or rabbits, animals that are not going to need the space that a Great Dane would.
Wild dog population has been relatively stable in Newcastle for the past 10 years. That could be about to change, with more people opting to build large homes with small backyards.
This would certainly have an impact on our pet numbers and also the type of dogs and cats that are going to be purchased. And there is evidence showing that in Sydney a lot of the ownership is going towards a smaller style dog, and there probably could also be an increase in cat numbers.
The fear of a barking dog upsetting the neighbours, a shortage of rental properties and legislative regulations are also apparently turning people off big dogs.
The increasing perception that pets cause problems when in fact the opposite is almost certainly the case. I think we'll see more and more young people in particular take a lot more time before they take the leap and get a pet.
Madeline Bond, NBN News. Daryl Clifford is lucky to be alive. Today he was surrounded by the people who saved his life in January when he suffered a heart attack while working at Stockton Hospital.
I was just hot and then I was outside the ute. I was having a bit of a spew and then I collapsed.
He was already unconscious and turning blue when his colleagues found him and administered CPR.
I didn't have time to think. Don't know what I was thinking at the time. It was just a case of we've got to do something. Luckily we'd had the training the week before.
This morning their life-saving efforts were recognised, with the New South Wales Ambulance Service awarding them certificates of commendation. The incident serves as a sober reminder of the importance of learning CPR.
It's a prime example why, because if you'd been at home or somewhere else where there weren't other people around that knew or had CPR training, the outcome could have been completely different. he might not be with us today.
So they really did save me life. They kept the oxygen to my brain. And yeah, thank them, big time.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Last year's demolition aside, Newcastle doesn't boast a good record in the nation's capital. That and the Raiders' recent form are points not lost on Kurt Gidley.
Plenty of people wrote them off in the first round, which was a pretty silly move, I think, to write them off that early, and they come out last week and proved they're still a good team.
While enjoying his role slipping from fullback into hooker during games, injury has opened the door for Milton Thaide's return, albeit from the bench.
It's good to be back up. I'm trying not to think too much of it at the moment. I just want to try and focus on what I need to do.
Former Raider Luke DeVico is in for the injured Daniel Toller too, but it's the return of Andrew Johns that's the big plus. Over his bout of concussion, the skipper's comeback will no doubt assist his heir apparent Jared Mullen, and the pair plan to make it a tough night out for their opposing halves, who boast limited top-grade game time.
I've been in that boat before, I've been halfback and, the 5'8" hasn't been that real experience next to me. So, I know what they're up against, so, I'm sure we'll be attacking them.
The match to kick off at 7 o'clock. It's a difficult spot for both player and the club. Nicky Carl has just won a spot back in the Socceroos, but to retain it, Carl believes he must be playing, and the A-League's extended off-season isn't helping. But a range of implications, from injury to insurance, makes loaning him to either a state league team or Asian club too big a risk for the Jets.
I'd hope and hopefully something can be worked out, because it's every player's dream to play for their national team, and I just got a sniff and I want to stay there,
Meanwhile, the Jets will actually play a game on Wednesday night against NBN League team Edgeworth. Meanwhile, no less than 6 current or former Newcastle players have been named in the Australian women's team to play the opening match of the Olympic qualifying stage at Coffs Harbour this Saturday. Cheryl Salisbury will again skipper the Matildas against Hong Kong, with Katie Gill to play up front. The Australian side goes into camp in Coffs Harbour tomorrow. And in Premier League hockey, there were some huge scores in round 2, none more so than in the Phoenix North Gosford match. The final score, 13-2, Phoenix North's way. Dane Pettit scoring an incredible 8 goals.
When almost 400,000 voters across the Hunters' 9 seats went to the polling booths on March 24, they went with a message for the state government. Labor's 8 safe seats turned from heartland to what now appears tonight to be heartburn, with only Cessnock, Charlestown, Swansea and Wallsend definitely secure. While the deciding preference votes were counted today, the results in all of the region's 4 tightly contested seats may not be known until tomorrow morning. Labor has preemptively claimed Lake Macquarie, Maitland and Newcastle with reduced margins, despite no public concession of defeat yet from Greg Piper, Peter Blackmore or John Tate. Neither of the ALP's debutantes, Newcastle's Jodie McKay and Maitland's Frank Terenzini, could be contacted today. It's believed they were in Sydney for a state parliamentary induction with other members-elect. Port Stephens Liberal candidate-elect Craig Bowman will be at State Parliament tomorrow for his party's leadership change from Peter Debnam to Barry O'Farrell. Craig Bowman's 64-vote victory to wrest Port Stephens from Labor gives the coalition a second Hunter seat alongside the Nationals' George Souris, who held his redrawn seat of Upper Hunter with over 60% of the vote. Gary Blair, NBN News.
While Australia may be the world's third largest wine exporter, selling around $3 billion worth of wine annually, increasing competition from countries like Argentina and Chile is taking its toll.
We've seen a downward pressure on our prices, although volumes have continued to climb, and I guess right across the industry that has reduced the profitability.
The drought and high Australian dollar is also having a negative impact.
On top of that, there's been a lot of pressure put on the smaller part of the industry in terms of access to markets as a result of retailer consolidation.
A report released by Wine Grape Growers Australia has identified the need for new measures to be taken to ensure the industry's long-term sustainability. While the Hunter Valley's faring better than the country's other wine-producing regions due to its reputation as an international tourist destination, vignerons there are also planning ahead.
I believe it's very important in the future that we do more to promote the regionality of our wines and promote the wines that this country is best recognised for, and by doing that lifting our profile and lifting the dollar return for our product.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
As the director of the Australian National Maritime Museum at Sydney's Darling Harbour, Mary Louise Williams knows position is everything. And she says moving Newcastle's maritime collection out of Fort Scratchley and down to the foreshore was the first key to the new centre's future success.
I thought this was a much better site. It has huge potential, and looking at Honeysuckle now, of course, it's a vibrant, exciting place to be. And that's a good spot for a museum.
Thousands of items are being restored by a team of dedicated volunteers, and the restored cargo shed at Honeysuckle is almost ready to house the first exhibition. But the National Director says it's vital that Hunter people support the centre when it opens. She also welcomed the Council's decision to sell off the ailing William IV replica steamship, saying if it was handed over to the Maritime Museum, it could sink the museum's budget.
I don't think you really need to have a heritage vessel. All your money will be spent looking after it, and they're very expensive things to maintain. They're wonderful, they're romantic and they're beautiful, and they're significant often, but they are a handful to keep.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
What a long trip home from the nation's capital for the Knights. But while Luke DeVico returned with a rib injury, which is sure to sideline him, Josh Perry was more upbeat about his pain in the neck. Falling badly in a tackle, the big forward heard two cracking sounds and left the field for immediate medical attention. He had scans today but remains hopeful all is okay.
Just the difference between like last night and this morning, had some anti-inflammatories and all that, and it's just 50 times better than it was last night.
He hopes to be propping up hooker Danny Badiris in his return from a suspension incurred last year.
That's a good gauge, I suppose. I'm not probably thinking of going out there and setting the world on fire, but I want to play pretty consistent.
With one of his best pre-seasons behind him, Badiris knows only game time will get him back to his best.
You can train all you want, punching bags and doing other thing, but there's no substitute for running out there and playing against some quality opposition. So that's what's going to happen on Saturday afternoon.
Between now and then, the coach is out to ensure his troops turn things around.
It's a big effort to get ourselves back from where we are now and then meet a team of Melbourne's quality, but that's the challenge.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
It's something we all need and in most cases immensely enjoy, but unfortunately our food isn't always safe to eat. In the last 2 weeks alone, there have been several serious outbreaks of food poisoning across Australia.
We've had a bakery outbreak in Sydney with salmonella, 267 people becoming ill. Prior to that, we had a problem with hepatitis A in a food handler in New South Wales and also in Queensland. We've had incidents with bakery products in Tasmania.
Today, more than 70 international food safety experts met in the Hunter Valley to try and come up with ways to ensure the food we eat, import and export is all safe.
We're looking to build systems. It's building the infrastructure, but it's also building human resources so that they can understand the problems and then address them in an effective way.
Through developing uniform food safety standards across the Asia-Pacific region, the experts hope to significantly curb food-related illnesses and improve trade.
It's very important for the safety, obviously, of the people in the region. If we can share our knowledge from some of the countries like Australia or China that's co-hosting this event with some of the smaller countries, food safety will be more of a priority.
The forum also acted as a precursor to the APEC Leaders Conference in Sydney later this year. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
The first of Labor's debutants declared elected today was in Newcastle. Jodie McKay's 787 vote win over John Tate bringing this promise. And with the ALP's 15.4% hold on Newcastle gone, the new member is eager to start work.
A representative for everyone. You know, I think we are, if you like, a marginal seat, but we have a voice in government.
Labor's 10.4% advantage also gone in Maitland. The criminal prosecutor cum MP able to explain the outcome.
A few reasons for that. Of course, the tough opposition that I had, and obviously the fact that the people out there may have voted Labor reluctantly, but they've sent a message. As the Premier said, we've heard that message.
A message that now will be louder after Mayor Greg Piper unseated Jeff Hunter in Lake Macquarie.
The Labor Party should be looking at the swing that they've had against them. There's 11.6% swing.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
I'm sure it's a message that the Labor Party in New South Wales has got very clear, given what's happened right across the Hunter, as basically the only area in the state that's been able to produce that sort of outcome.
The seat of Newcastle particularly cannot be taken for granted by any party, and I think I've been able to achieve that. I'm looking forward to...
The windows have been smashed by mindless vandals and weeds are thriving on the bowling greens. But it's once you step inside for a closer look that you see just how badly vandalised the former bowling club has been. There's growing frustration at the lack of urgency being shown by the owner, the Department of Lands, as the building falls into disrepair.
We really need to do something with it because it is an eyesore as far as the city's concerned, and unless someone comes along and wants to spend money on it, well, then the logical thing would be to demolish it.
The Lord Mayor has suggested that the state government clears the site and hands control back to council.
We'd be able to take it and care and control the same as the rest of King Edward Park and perhaps see that it's returned to parkland. If the building's in very poor condition, well, then that's what needs to be done.
In December last year, the Department of Lands told NBN News that a draft management plan for the site would be advertised in February this year. Well, that's still not done, and today the same department could only say the draft plan would be completed in the near future. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Spotlight's Hunter Street megastore is among the company's top 5 earners nationally. Some of that business will be transferred to a new branch opening at Rutherford in less than a fortnight as the retailer looks to capitalise on the population explosion in the Lower Hunter. But confirmation Spotlight is planning to shut up shop in Newcastle West within 2 years will come as a huge disappointment to the area's business community, which has been trying for some time to rejuvenate the troubled retail strip.
There's a couple of sites in mind, but we haven't finalised one yet, but definite plans for relocation.
Sites at Katara, Glendale, Bennett's Green and on Industrial Drive are being considered. There's also another question mark hanging over the future of David Jones in the Hunter Street Mall. With the lease on the building running out next year, the company is negotiating with the owner about renovations. But if an agreement cannot be reached, it too would consider relocating. And Newcastle City Council last night approved plans for a gym at Westfield Katara. Restrictions were placed on trading times to address residents' concerns about noise. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
They arrived just in time, must have known Easter was coming for us, so they're catching quite a bit over the last week or so. Matter of fact, if the bad weather comes, we've got about a couple of tonnes frozen down from last week.
The Matildas only arrived in camp late yesterday, but already the locals are singing their praises. Last month's announcement, the side will be based in Coffs for 3 Olympic qualifiers, also given the thumbs up by the players.
Preparation started out really well. You know, we had a training session yesterday where the Wallabies train, and it's a fantastic field, and you know, it's great to be in Coffs Harbour. It's good weather, and you know, everything's perfect.
Relatively new to the elite level, it's this kind of atmosphere Warners Bay's Lauren Colthorpe is hoping to get used to.
I think I'm slowly getting more developed in the squad and looking forward to, getting a bit of time.
The region last hosted the national side in 2001, but this new look Matilda side is ranked 14th in the world, a squad with high aspirations.
Being ranked number 14th now, it's the best ranking we've ever had, and we certainly can move a few more places.
The fact the team will have a permanent home for at least 6 months is a huge boost.
Consistently, continuously being able to beat those teams ranked above you and the teams ranked in the top 4 in the world.
The Matildas face Hong Kong this Saturday. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
The world's most photographed exhibition from the National Portrait Gallery in London features 10 of the 20th century's best-known faces as you've never seen them before. Images of Muhammad Ali discovered in a drawer after 25 years, the beautiful and cheeky moods of Audrey Hepburn, and the photos that Marilyn Monroe didn't want anyone to see.
and she was so controlling she actually destroyed or marked the negatives of photographs that she didn't think were up to her public persona. And you see photographs in the exhibition with X's across the negatives where Marilyn defaced them so they wouldn't be used in publicity.
The exhibition opens tomorrow night. Also at the gallery today, the first gathering in a series called Poets Paint Words, where well-known poets write a few lines based on a particular painting. Today it was Les Murray, inspired by a 1968 Dale Hickey painting.
A pose of palace cavalry officers in plum Crimean fig, spurs and pointed boots, not at all the stamp of tight-buttoned guards executing.
Police are calling it Operation Tortoise, apt given the fact that they want drivers to take it slow and steady this Easter break.
We will be targeting the driver speeding. There will be more police in the region over this long weekend, and they'll be coming up from Sydney, doing areas such as the Hunter right through to Bulahdelah.
Those caught speeding or not wearing a seatbelt will cop a doubling of demerit points until midnight on Monday. Hundreds of holidaymakers headed off early this afternoon, with sections of Hunter roads bumper to bumper as the region's traffic volume tripled. The driver of Ivor at Beresfield was kept busy as motorists took a break from the road.
The heaviest traffic we expect will be this evening and also early tomorrow morning in the early hours before the sun rises and all up until about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning.
And just as many Hunter families pack up the car for a road trip, petrol prices have increased to an average of $1.29.9 across the lower Hunter. Petrol companies say the rises are typical of the weekly price cycle and that the increase in the past 2 weeks is in reaction to higher Singapore refinery prices. But that's little comfort to those filling up at the Bowser. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
It may not be known for it, but according to the CSIRO, Scone is the 7th windiest place in Australia. Now developers want to capitalise on that, turning wind into power via 47 wind turbines proposed for 2 sites in the hills just 13 kilometres west of Scone's town centre.
We think it's a great opportunity. We can have wind turbines, solar thermal plant, we've got an opportunity for a closed loop hydro, and we'd like to build a visitor centre as well.
If the energy farm proceeds, 16 turbines will be able to be seen from the township. While it won't have a say in the state government's approval process, council says it would prefer turbines to be built over coal mines.
I suppose that it's the better of 2 options. It's better to be able to see wind turbines and to perhaps be able to see another open cut mine.
To put things into perspective, the wind turbines would output roughly 1/20th of what Bayswater Power Station produces. The developer claims that 1 turbine could potentially provide power to the township of Scone.
We have coal mining, it's a fact of life, and we have to be practical. We're going to need coal for quite some time to come. But over time, alternative energy sources are going to become more important, and I think that this is a positive step in that direction.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
This bushland next to Kurri Kurri Hospital is owned for community use, but a majority of Cessnock councillors voted last night to alter the local environment plan to allow a private school to be built there. A rescission motion has put the decision on hold, and some say the land should be kept for a true community use rather than a business venture.
we don't regard that sort of school as being a true community use. And in fact, many people would say that the council is betraying the people and going back on its word to reserve this land for community use.
The school for 1,500 students from kinder to year 12 is being proposed by a Brisbane-based company called Independent Colleges Australia, but the plan hasn't impressed the New South Wales Teachers Federation.
I think any institution that is there just to make a profit and not primarily there to have an educational rationale is not a really sound basis for something like education.
But the company says it's a not-for-profit organisation. The matter will go to the next council meeting in a fortnight. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
I mean, definitely I just come from the doctor then, so he's pretty happy that there's going to be no more damage. So, yeah, ready to go.
It's been a phase in his football career Craig Deans would probably rather forget, and even if the result didn't count for anything, you still get the feeling there was just a hint of apprehension about the defender before last night's match. It turns out he had nothing to worry about, even if it did take a little time to gel with the boys.
I've had a sort of month's training now and played 2 games in the local competition, so fitness-wise wasn't too bad. Still a bit of work to do, but yeah, I felt okay.
Another returning from injury, Stuart Michalek, who'd been resting his shoulder since the end of last season. The midfielder glad for any game time before he joins in Ollie Roo's camp in Dubai on Sunday, ahead of their clash against Saudi Arabia. As for the match, well, a Jets victory never really looked in doubt. After Edgeworth spoiled 2 good chances, Newcastle clicked into gear. A cheeky Nick Carl chip into the 18 yards saw Mark Bridge rise to the challenge. And he had a hand too in the Jets' second goal. Mind you, Joel Griffiths did most of the hard work. After Matt Thompson got caught in a tangle, the Jets were able to seal the deal just before the end of the first half, with Griffiths putting the nail in the coffin with a free kick. Jessica Phillis, NBN News. The most impressive aspect of these design projects is that they're the work of high school students. Many females could see a need for this. It's a mirror which provides all-round viewing, as built by St Francis Xavier's Cameron Bannerman. Ashley Dunn of St Paul's at Burrigal came up with a new age seating system for the modern home, which can be neatly stored or assembled into a number of configurations. The works are part of a travelling exhibition showcasing the final projects of HSC Design and Technology students. These colourful creations are African costumes that Amelia Peacock designed for use by the Hunter Singers. However, they won't be used on the choir's tour of Europe, which the group today left for, with vocal cords all warmed up. They'll delight audiences in England, Belgium and France during the 2.5-week trip. Jessica Phillis, NBN News.
The wet weather could have been blamed for some of the trouble on Hunter roads, but police say speed is a bigger factor.
People aren't obeying the speed limit and are driving irresponsibly.
It was an Easter miracle no one was killed during this incident at 12 Mile Creek north of Raymond Terrace. A motorist had stopped to change a tyre on a boat trailer when another vehicle crashed into it, slowing traffic to a crawl. Drivers are on notice that every available highway patrol officer has been rostered on over the long weekend.
They are being assisted by General Duties Police performing random breath testing, and we also got people from the Traffic Support Group in Sydney coming up patrolling our roads.
Driver reviver stations reported a heavy flow of visitors from First Light, not that it fazed the volunteers.
Oh, I've been doing this for a few years now, yeah, and love it, love to. I feel like I've been on a holiday when I go back home, so after talking to all the people.
The rain forced much-needed pit stops for running repairs, while the queue for the loo resembled a rock concert. With more wet weather forecast for the long weekend, police are reminding motorists to always drive to the conditions. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
For these holidaymakers at Lake Macquarie, it wasn't such a good Friday. Wet, drenched, soaked, whichever way you look at it, camping in these soggy, muddy conditions can't be fun.
Today's pretty ordinary. We're supposed to be out on the water today, but we're trying to stay dry here. It's pretty windy, pretty ordinary, but the kids are having a good time.
And that they were, a card game keeping them amused. After setting up their tents and tarps at the Belmont Pines Holiday Park, this group from Sydney were going to make the most of their Easter holiday no matter what. And while the rain was hard to escape, it seemed the consensus was to stay positive. Well, some of us must beg to differ, but the ducks certainly agree, enjoying the extra puddles. And while plenty bypassed the rain and the traffic hold-ups by staying at home, hundreds were caught in a queue of a totally different kind at the Fisherman's Co-op. Seafood is synonymous with Good Friday, and it seems almost everyone in the Hunter will be tucking into a fish and prawn dinner tonight. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News. It may have been a little damp, but it didn't deter the diehards, with boats dragged out of the work sheds and off their moorings ahead of this weekend's festival. As the saying goes, there's absolutely nothing half so much worth doing as simply messing about in boats, and there was plenty of that on the eve of Heritage Afloat. The festival creates something of a floating museum, including restored timber boats more than 100 years old, while others are recently launched replicas.
Boats from Queensland and interstate from everywhere. They come from everywhere. We're at capacity. We've got over 100 boats, so we need a bigger wharf.
Among those on display is Patience, the name rather fitting given the constant varnishing needed to keep this beauty in tip-top condition. And like many of them, this boat has a unique story, with painter Stephen Dews exchanging one of his artworks for the Colin Archer-designed American yacht.
He decided, well, look, I don't want to sell you this boat, I'd like to swap it for one of your paintings. So the deal was struck, and this is why we're here today.
The festival begins tomorrow and continues until Sunday afternoon at the Toronto foreshore. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
The team had barely warmed up when Andrew Johns went down. A simple enough looking knock had the halfback in agony. While teammates didn't react initially, Johns knew he was in trouble. Unable to train, he saw a specialist in Sydney today who ruled him out. The full extent of the problem won't be known until he has further medical tests, but this latest drama must be a concern given Johns' history. His 2003 season was famously ended due to a neck injury, and he's suffered similar problems in recent years. Rightly or wrongly, the loss of Johns only heaps more expectation on hooker Danny Badiris. Playing his first game since September, there'll be little relief against a rampant Melbourne Storm side led by the man who replaced Badiris in the Australian team, Cameron Smith.
I don't want to get bogged down in that. I think it's going to be a challenge. I want to play better than every hooker that you come up against, and it just so happens to be him in this game.
Adam Woolnough will make his 100th top-grade appearance, but it's future contracts that both he and fellow forward Josh Perry know they're also playing for these days.
I'd certainly like to get back into form this year. It's been a bit of a slow start. Finished the year really well last year.
Obviously everyone's talking about their contracts and all that sort of stuff. I'm just trying to put that in the back of my mind and just play footy, and if I do that, all those things will look after themselves.
The way things began, it looked every bit like being a good contest. After Wests opened the scoring, Central Charlestown quickly returned serve through Mitch Moore. It stayed locked at 4-4 for much of the first half, but a try-scoring blitz either side of the break turned the game firmly in favour of the home side. When Jermaine Ale toasted to try-line success early in the second half, it was already 22 points to 6. It wasn't all good news though for the Rosellas. Captain coach Kurt Hancock left for treatment, while it went all wrong for Troy Wright, who was stretchered from the field. Things didn't change though as Wests really opened up. Matt Redman applying the finishing touches for his second try, while Chris Swan and Brad Wallace combined for another long-range effort that ended with Damien Fry's crossing as the Rosellas raced towards 50. The Butcher boys looked like they'd had enough, but Wests was running this show. It finally ended 56 points to 4.
I mean, we've been together for quite a while now and had many international matches, so I think our preparation is good and hopefully we can just get out there and play.
But we have done well in our previous games against Asian teams, and so we're very confident that we can turn on the goods and put a few goals away.
Several inmates are now working as graphic artists and illustrators. Some are doing wine labels, and they're supporting themselves, and they've reunited with their families.
The suspicious deaths recently of Cooks Hill identities Lily Wood and Frank Newbury were just two events that sent shockwaves through the local community. Anglican Bishop of Newcastle Brian Farron says Easter is a time to instead focus on peace and goodwill.
This Easter really happens against a backdrop of violence, both locally and globally. In Newcastle, we've been really shocked by the level of social violence. And of course, globally, we're still caught up in Iraq, and there's just so much death and destruction that's going on. So against that backdrop, we want to have a celebration of life and hope. And we believe that Easter is really God's great answer to the violence that stalks human life.
Catholic Bishop Michael Malone says the story of Jesus rising from the dead can help people find an inner peace.
Some people are not very comfortable with being alone, being sort of quiet, being sort of empty, so they fill their lives with either other people or other things, or you buy clothes, or you do things to sort of make yourself very busy so that you're not somehow coming into contact with yourself so much. In the emptiness of the tomb, in the emptiness of our lives, in the emptiness of the desert or the mountain, that God is present.
While the wet weather didn't deter the crowds, it did create some competition for a trackside spot out of the rain. The wet road made for a flying start and a slippery finish as braking proved futile. It was the fastest this little Miss Piggy had gone, and if you've never seen a flying cow, then this is what one looks like. The competition was fierce, especially between these boys, Harley Rowan narrowly beating his brother Jaden. While going downhill was easy, getting back to the top proved hard work until someone had this ingenious idea. As the track dried out, the speed picked up. This cart was in tip-top condition until it had the wind knocked out of its sails, sending a man overboard. Others had a more graceful finish. All money raised from the day will be donated to the Country Women's Association, who will spend it within drought-affected towns to help hunter farmers.
We're very fortunate here. We've had some good storms and a bit of follow-up rain, but when you go up the valley, up around Merriwall, for example, there's no water in dams and people are really struggling. So that's why we'd like to support other people who are affected by the drought.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
Obviously there's going to be some hysteria over this, but look, wait till I get the scans back. I'll know more then, but I'm confident I'll be back on the field.
In all, the Hunter has 6 current Matildas who are either based in the region or develop their football in the area. Captain Cheryl Salisbury is one of those, and she led her side out wanting nothing less than an emphatic win to kickstart their final stage of qualifying for the Beijing Olympics. With that in mind, Australia attacked from the outset as the Hong Kong keeper came under all sorts of pressure. Sarah Walsh was the first to find range though, opening the Aussies' account. With her radar now locked on goal, Walsh took only another 3 minutes to hit the target again. Colette McCullum followed up that effort after she found herself one-on-one with the keeper. Newcastle's Katie Gill was the next to add her name to the score sheet as Australia continued to flex its muscle. Vice-captain Joanne Peters always has a head for goal, and the Newcastle-based player helped make it 6-0 by half-time. Gill started the show in the second half as she brought up a double. McCullum went one better as her third made it 8-0 to the home side. Although never really tested, Australia didn't ease off. They'll head overseas on Wednesday to play Chinese Taipei, which should provide a much bigger test.
Newcastle's Christchurch Cathedral was filled with the faithful as they gathered to commemorate one of the most sacred days on the Christian calendar. A procession and solemn Eucharist service marked the resurrection of Christ over 2,000 years ago. Meanwhile, youngsters were wrapped up in Easter for somewhat different reasons. The promise of chocolate and lots of it making their day all the more special. And those who weren't at church or engaged in an egg hunt took advantage of a break in the recent wet weather to enjoy the outdoors. On the roads, police say motorist behaviour has been mixed over the long weekend. While both the number of people caught speeding and not wearing seatbelts in the Hunter has decreased when compared to the Easter period last year, the same can't be said for drunk drivers.
In the last 3 days,
We've just done over 4,780 breath tests, and 39 drivers have been stopped and arrested for drink driving, and this is 12 up on the same period last year.
While traffic was flowing freely through the region today, it's not expected to be the case tomorrow. Police are advising motorists to avoid the Pacific Highway and John Renshaw Drive from lunchtime, with a large volume of holidaymakers expected to pass through the Hunter. Double demerit points remain in place until midnight on Monday. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
The circumstances surrounding the night's lead-up aside, Newcastle's performance was the most pleasing thing for the coach.
I thought tonight our middle was extremely good, much better than we've been, and that's the standard that I'm really looking for.
Round 4, we're at a standard where we're probably happy with, but we can get a lot better.
Watching from the sidelines was more than just a pain in the neck for the injured skipper.
Hopefully, if the scans show up well and he recovers quickly, as Josh Perry did from last weekend, he could be available for next week. If he's not, we'd like to think it'll only be another week.
Steve Simpson is also in some doubt too with the knee problem.
Yeah, 10 goals in 2 games, it's not too bad, but it's setting the bar a bit high. I don't know if I'll be able to keep that up. The traffic bank-up started earlier than expected today, with the Pacific Highway at Hexham slow going from 11 o'clock. One theory is the recent wet weather motivated motorists to cut their holiday short. And as the day wore on, things didn't get much better, with cars crawling along the Hunter's main roads. Police say while motorists have been fairly well behaved over the long weekend, with the number of people caught speeding and not wearing seatbelts down in comparison to those caught over the Easter period last year, the number of people caught drink driving has increased despite fewer breath tests being conducted.
It's quite alarming to see that there are still those amount of drivers that want to disobey and ignore our warnings and drink and drive, and it's very, very silly to do.
The police road safety operation and double demerit points end at midnight tonight. Madeline Bond, NBN News. It's only too easy to see how tragedy could strike any one of the people living along the New England Highway in Rutherford, thanks to a $1 million line marking and resurfacing project by the Roads and Traffic Authority. Where there was once an access lane separating the highway from the curbside, there's now only road.
Well, I've got trouble coming in and out our driveway. I've got a learner and a P-plate driver that's trying to get in and out of there. We've had 5 near misses coming into our driveway.
But that's just taken all our rights away from us. I mean, there's no parking.
The residents say the RTA has been unsympathetic to their problem and has so far not offered any solutions.
They said, they're doing this for the motorists to make things easier for them, but they seem to have forgotten the residents. So it's just stupid.
I think somebody sat in Sydney and drew up the plans and they looked okay, so you go ahead and do it. Nobody asked us what we thought, what it was like.
Residents want the access lane returned and the highway's speed limit reduced, and they're not the only ones seeing red over the changes. The project has left the Rutherford takeaway shop with no off-street parking, its customers now illegally parking outside the eatery or some distance away. The RTA was today unavailable for comment. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Politicians have short memories, but promises stick, as Bob Carr found out when pledging his support for a multi-purpose shipping terminal in Newcastle.
But we would move heaven and earth to see a major port facility of this kind established here in Newcastle.
That was almost a decade ago, the comment haunting the ALP since. But unlike the vacant BHP site, the political landscape has dramatically changed, with new people and pledges.
My first priority is my transport plan to actually start working on improving, in particular, bus services in the city.
In Lake Macquarie, a public hospital on the west side is on Greg Piper's radar to complement the existing polyclinic at Toronto.
But I don't believe it's addressing the needs of the local community.
The health card's being played in Maitland too, in particular to make good a $10 million redevelopment promise.
First priority is to make sure that we get the emergency department at Maitland Hospital started as soon as possible.
And in Port Stephens, now the state's most marginal seat, it's law and order, with the issue recently brought to a head on the Tillagary Peninsula.
We have all sorts of problems with vandalism and worse in Port Stephens.
Whether it's all lip service depends on the next 4 years. Adam McKilrick, NBN News. It's through this DVD presentation that the Hunter Regional Tourism Organisation sells itself. Come next April, though, global travel brokers in particular will see it all firsthand, with the largest annual gathering of tourism types to meet in Newcastle.
It represents probably the biggest single international marketing opportunity that we're ever likely to see in the region.
It's called the Australian Tourism Export Council Symposium, and it's worth around $1.5 million to the host region, but the long-term benefits are immeasurable.
These are the people that actually decide what Australian tourism products and the sort of destinations that are sold to their customers in overseas markets.
Which of course suggests the Hunter isn't featuring as much as it could.
That's one of our main reasons for wanting to get it here. We really see this as a launching pad for getting our destination into the international tourism market.
Newcastle City Hall will enjoy its time in the sun as well in hosting the 3-day conference. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
A relatively light day for the Knights, and there may be a few more yet for Steve Simpson, who injured his knee at the weekend.
It feels all right, actually. It was a bit sore at the time, and I suppose I got a bit of time to run it out before the game finished. And I was hobbling a little bit, but it feels all right, actually. It's pulled up good.
The Pack got a pass mark at the weekend too, however, it's improvement they're all after.
The challenge is, I suppose, now is to do that against South on Sunday, and then the following weeks. It's a good step in the right direction. If we can continue to do that, we'll be well on the right track.
At the back of everyone's mind, though, are those scans tomorrow for Captain Andrew Johns, which will determine his footballing future.
I suppose we've got to start training as if he's not going to be playing. If he plays, it's a bonus, and if he doesn't, well, we're prepared for that. So, but in saying that, I wish him all the best, and hopefully the scan comes good.
Jim Callanan, NBN News. Never one to take a backward step, Stuart Mashalik saw out the A-League season despite a badly damaged shoulder. He only returned to the playing field last week in a friendly match, but got through it and proved he's recovered in the process. The job now is to convince his new Ollie Roos coach that he's fit to play a crucial Olympic qualifying match against Saudi Arabia in 9 days' time. Adam Apuzzo, striker Mark Bridge and Troy Hearfield are all in the touring party, which will play a warm-up game this week before the team to play Saudi Arabia is selected. Meanwhile, Azuri Football Club has won the pre-season competition final against Broadmeadow. John Bennis fooled the crowd with a strike that ended in the side netting. No problems at the other end though, as Aaron McLaughlin had all the time he needed to make it 1-0 going into half-time. Broadmeadow got one in the back of the net in the second half, only to have it disallowed for taking out the keeper. The niggle didn't stop there either. David Bailey's second bookable offence saw the defender finish the game early. It gave Josh Maguire a shot from the spot, which he booted home to cement a 2-0 win and the President's Cup.
Clear skies coming on the outside with Kate Breton and Don't Tell Ted. Kimberly Dane still in front, 150 to go. He leads from Nuclear Sky. Kimberly Dane is finding plenty, and a bold front-running display by Cassidy on Kimberly Dane. Leads all the way, Photo second and third. That's a real head bobber, Nuclear Sky and Don't Tell Ted. And then Kate Breton.